Welcome to today's episode of CLCI Live, brought to you by the award-winning and ICF accredited school, Certified Life Coach Institute. Sit back, relax, and enjoy today's episode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Tuesday Live at 4. Today, we have decided to discuss the topic of biases, and particularly the biases within coaching sessions. Why they're important, why you should be mindful of them each session. We're going to go through all of that. I think what is important to begin this stream would be to actually define what a bias is. So first, we'll go ahead and give you guys the dictionary definition of what a bias is, and I'll read it out loud for you guys. So a bias is defined as a particular tendency, trend, inclination, feeling, or opinion, especially one that is preconceived or unreasoned. With that, do you guess have any other way you would define a bias, or is this probably pretty
I would maybe even say, I guess that's not exclusive then, as the especially one that is preconceived or unreasoned, because I think a lot of biases are reasoned, they're just not fully reasoned out, or like it's not good reason that
there's
you're
a big element I think we're not talking about either here. I don't know what's going on with my camera. It's also that they are both conscious and unconscious. So like a lot of biases we're not even aware of having until it comes to awareness. Before we start though, there's something I want to that might be a little, I guess, maybe controversial. But I want to first do away with the concept that if we can and approach this from like a place of not good or bad, because not all bias is a bad thing, and not all bias is just approach it as is, and not put a bias on a bias to begin with.
My biases are good. Everyone else's biases are bad.
Mind you, there are destructive elements and there are productive elements in both cases, and I think examining both and being aware of both is really what's key. It's the self-awareness key.
I think that's kind of what gets missed, is that when we say that we're biased, like many other words, it automatically has a negative connotation, and it is simply to become aware, like you're mentioning, Brooke. I like that. It's not a good thing, it's not a bad thing, because we are all raised to be human beings. We are not raised to be a robot, and with the way that we're raised, we might get culturally family stuff, we might get our friend stuff, we might develop our own from our own experiences or opinions, in a sense, right? Based on how we experience the world. And those unconscious ones, I took a test a few years ago. I don't remember what it was. Anyway, it's just you had to choose really quick. And I'm thinking, this can't be really a test to tell whether I'm biased or not in this. And I just can't see how that is. But anyway.
Lisa, I have that test up here. I think it's called Project Implicit. It's with Harvard University, and it's all these different tests. And I'm going to drop the link in our blog as well, because this is really fascinating. It's a bunch of different tests that test your implicit bias towards age, transgender issues, presidents, religion, weapons.
But that's the thing. We can have biases in so many. We can have biases. It's just simply it's a filter. It's our perception. It's a judgment, right?
Well, it's a shortcut essentially for your brain to take, because you can't literally. There's no possible way any human being could just sit and reason every single feeling and decision they make. You have to have shortcuts to be able to function as a human being, and that's the reason why we have biases in the first place.
Well, it's also an inclination to judge, but not judgment. Again, not a bad thing necessarily, but we categorize so that we know how to function or behave in certain environments for our own survival in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I was mentioning earlier when we were off camera that you have to understand who you are, what you're experiencing, because that bias is how you build boundaries. It's your understanding of who you are so that you can create those relationships and interactions on best either supports you, not necessarily to reinforce negative bias necessarily. I'm not mean that, but to know what affects you and what doesn't. I was playing around this concept. I know I'm talking a lot. Hang on one second. I was playing around with this concept when you told me we were covering this today. And it's something simple as a stoplight. Here we know it's a stoplight. You know, we have a red light, we have a yellow light, we have a green light. But what if we call it a go light?
Well, there's some places that don't have the red light, green light, yellow light. That doesn't exist everywhere. That doesn't not always the case. It's also maybe in a way something we take for granted, right? Like it's an assumption. Like we expect, and it can be. So let's. I think we're out here. We're talking really out here still. Yeah. So what I want to do is bring it in here a bit to something that is more tangible.
Jordan, what's your bias?
Okay, wait. I was just going to ask a question.
Oh, less tangible then? Okay.
So we're talking about, okay, what it is, all these things. Let's get more specific. Like, when is a bias good? When is a bias bad? What are examples? And then how does it apply to coaching? And how do we maneuver through it knowing we have biases? Like, how do we manage our biases and adapt them in a way that is productive?
So when we get into reflecting back what our client says, and I'm in a coaching session, when we get into reflecting what our client says, it gives them an opportunity to hear what they're saying and to recognize if that's something they want to change. So that's a bias. That's them recognizing a particular way that they interact with the world, and that gives them an opportunity to potentially an opportunity to go, yeah, that's it. No, I want to make that change. Ooh, did I really say that? Or yeah, I'm totally behind that, right? So it gives them an opportunity to make a choice. Go ahead.
I think we want to narrow it. I mean, real specifically, we've sort of touched on it. Biases can be cultural. They can be gender, age, height. Yes, people are biased. Some people think taller people are better than other people. Like, it's true. It's an actual thing. Popularity, celebrity. The way that we as a culture sort of put celebrity on this platform is a bias in many ways. And we are assuming they are somehow better or more qualified because of celebrity, but that's not the case. They're just people like anybody else. So I think that it is it's an interesting space. It's also a space that can be people can get very sensitive in as well, because a lot of times, yes, being an unconscious thing. It is what, again, eventually leads us to the stereotyping and assuming in ways that aren't productive and can be hurtful.
Honing in on things that aren't an issue. We have this experiment in our class. That somebody wears sunglasses, and it comes from across. Anytime that we put our own thoughts to it about someone else, that is our bias.
So maybe we can give an example. So, like, if I'm going to just describe somebody, a person, and then you guys tell me what your impression is of this person. So, a person walks in, they are wearing big baggy pants, and we'll say male, okay. They look disheveled, as if they have not put themselves together, a little dirty fingernails, and clearly a very frazzled human being. What do you guys think of this person?
Construction worker. Just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Yes. Everybody's going to have a different concept, right? A different assumption.
If they are frazzled, I'm probably going to lean towards what Anthony said with homeless person is probably going to be the first that comes to mind. But if they come in dirty and they've got baggy jeans.
Well, you kind of just showed your own bias by just assuming that it was a man as well. Like when you first said person, I was like, it's a man. This is a man we're talking about.
Yeah, she did say male.
I did say I did qualify that. I didn't have to, though. I could have not.
I automatically assumed my bias was that.
I'm an artist who builds things, and I get my hands dirty all the time. And my clothes, the act of keeping paint off of my clothing sometimes is like a miracle. So very quickly can an impression of me being this sort of like, what disheveled, I don't take life seriously person can happen, but I mean, it's just that sometimes is not my priority, as it is with somebody else. But it does not mean that I'm not successful at my job, that I'm not all these other things. However, a lot of assumptions will run with that. I mean, you take it 10 years ago, tattoos. If you had a tattoo, it was taboo even 20 years ago. Nowadays, I mean, everybody and their mother has a tattoo. So the bias existed.
Yeah,
I don't have one.
Piercings is also in that same boat. Yeah, and I'm glad that we're kind of moving in a space where I believe in general we're kind of moving in a space as a human society. We're kind of moving away from those physical appearances defining a person, not to get too deep, but who they are as a person and what they can do. Especially this is really relevant in the workforce, things like that.
But there are, I mean, Misha Safran, or was it Misha, said unemployed, homeless, mental illness. There is bias around mental illness.
Oh boy.
So much bias around mental illness.
Oh boy, big time.
Crazy. And it's not fair either.
Big time.
I mean, honestly, towards any illness, a lot of times their bias comes along with that. I mean, just honestly, anything and everything can have a bias attached. So what in a coaching space, if we as coaches, we have biases, right? So how can it be helpful to us and how can it be hurtful to us as a coach?
Well, the hurtful, I think, is easier.
Yeah.
Because those assumptions that we make,
brain bias.
those assumptions that we make about somebody, and if we go to that experiment that you're speaking about, a person who's male, disheveled, comes in with baggy clothes, and we're coaching them, and depending on what comes out of them, we might have an opinion about something. That bias comes out usually as an opinion, and a distorted opinion, because it's really from our own perspective, not that. Can we give baggy male, disheveled male a name?
Well,
Robert.
Sure. Yeah, Robert. There we go.
Okay. So now we've just humanized him.
Yeah, right. Now he's a person. Isn't that crazy? Just a name can do that to somebody. Like all of a sudden, it's like, whoa, that they have a name. That's horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now Robert means something a little more than this person.
This is reminding me of my ideal client exercise in so many ways.
That's when we really get into a person's bias to like who they want their ideal client to be. But bias in the good sense. Let's tackle the hard one first for biases that coaches have that are good. I think coaches have a bias towards, assuming the best, assuming that everything is going to be goal oriented, assuming that everything's going to work out, and we have like faith in our clients, which is good.
That's assuming that's all. Maybe all coaches are like, my clients suck.
Well, there's always exceptions to bias, but I think we've seen that in classes that everybody seems to have a positive view on the outcomes of a client, and they want the best for them.
Yes.
So people they tend to assume the best, which is good. The downside of that is we don't want our behavior to reflect that and always be the cheerleader.
I'm reading from ICF about negative versus positive bias. And we are so negatively inclined, it takes between 5 and 10 positive events to counterbalance one negative event.
Wow.
Yeah, Gottman came up with that statistic, actually.
Crazy.
Not ICF.
Well, it's just in this article I'm reading.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's just that's I mean, now the reason is for that because when something negative happens, the consequence being potential death, potential trauma. So we quickly hold on to that so we can protect. Where positive, we don't have to worry about that. Happy go space, So it is a nature. What is it? Nature versus nurture, a natural inclination, evolutionary construct, I guess is what I was thinking. I think I do like Anthony's concept, though, that coaches have a natural inclination to think the best of their clients. I think that also we have an empathy bias in many ways. Like there
it is. That is true. Absolutely.
And maybe a natural inclination to want to do good and help sometimes, to our own fault at times. But that it's a bias towards believing in others, sort of that change is possible, and that having a better life for themselves is possible.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I know that there have been so many times I have felt like, man, if everybody could just have a conversation, and just take our class and have a conversation afterwards, the world would be more peaceful. I genuinely feel that way.
Look what Misha wrote, and I love that concept is to remove the stigma attached to children from one room to the next room, and they get to have a fresh place to land so that they can have real conversation and real connection. That's nice. I mean, it's not what she said, but kind of a combination. I really enjoy. So good bias, bad bias.
I can think of plenty of bad biases. I guess that's my bias.
We can all run to the bad. So let's challenge ourselves. Like Anthony said, let's pick some good ones. What are good biases? Yeah, I think Jerome, go for it.
Well, I was going to say the difficulty in that is, you mentioned it, is it takes 5 times for something good to happen for it to counterbalance one negative bias, which is why it would be so difficult to really, I'm thinking, think of a particular positive bias right off of the top of the head at the moment. They can be hard to really.
I have a natural inclination to assume I guess I expect the worst, but I really do hope for the best. So I think that everybody else is kind of thinking like me. And so I can be somebody who's very always conscientious of what other people is going on in their lives to some degree, and try to help or, but I have an awareness of the people in my world that maybe other people don't have as much of an awareness of me in my space. So I have an assumption sometimes that people know what I'm thinking or feeling, because I would know before they, and so it's like, I think the best of people. I think that everybody else is thinking the best of me, and it doesn't always work that way. I don't know how else to explain it.
I don't know. That sparked something in my head at the moment when you said that. For whatever reason, a positive bias. Maybe I might be, defining this improperly, but maybe a positive bias would be assuming. So if you do see someone who let's talk about Robert again, Bob. Maybe he was going through.
Some. Now he's a nickname.
You're not familiar now with him.
He's our friend. We know Bob
friend
well.
Named Robert Bob. He sounds exactly like you described. I'm just kidding. We've got Robert. Say Robert. That's a positive bias. So say you do see someone like Robert walking to a store, you're shopping or whatever, and that is someone that is presented to you. Maybe a positive bias would be to think in the manner that, immediately you're thinking towards, maybe this guy that's what he does for work. That's what he's doing for a job. That's, he's not necessarily.
Maybe he likes maybe he's an archeologist.
Yeah.
Bob could be an archaeologist. We don't know. He could be Indiana Jones.
I actually have a real story about something like this that occurred to me when I was either in New York or Maryland or something like that. I was taking the bus with somebody else. They were sitting on the outside of the seat. I was on the inside of the seat, and we were right by the door where people could walk in. The middle, on a bus, you can have a middle door. So that middle door, not that front door. So somebody was coming in. It was a very old gentleman, just like you said, dirty fingernails. Okay, well, he didn't have necessarily his baggy pants, but he was definitely disheveled. He had little sores all over him. His hands were a mess. But he was, tippy. I mean, he didn't look wasted or anything like that, but he definitely did not have his sailor feet on the bus. He was tipsy and all over the place. And he was trying to grab onto the railing. I had to push the person next to me out of the way so I could grab his hand and put it on the railing. When we're in that space, that bias of wanting to be kind to others, I think that's a good thing. I think when we have a lot of times horrific events that occur, the biases become a positive interaction, and people just want to help others. I think when we're in that helping space, it can be a good bias.
Sorry, Brooke. Go ahead.
So I recently listened to a podcast, a Hidden Brain podcast, about something similar in this space where this woman was asked to go out from person to person and ask. She was tasked basically to go to like a subway station and to borrow $20 from people, and they were also tasked to to use a phone. And she went into it thinking, I'm not gonna get a penny. Nobody's gonna help me. Nobody. And she had this preconceived notion that nobody will help me in this space. And she went in there, and she was shocked. It was terrifying to do it, but shocked to find out the willingness of people to help, because people naturally have an inclination to help other person. But her assumption was that she was going to be an imposition, but what was so funny is the complete opposite is true. And so that it's a similar space where a bias can almost be interchanged for, again, like assumption or something, but it can be good and bad, right? There's a bias to help, and then there's a bias that folks aren't going to help me, but they will. So it's just interesting. Jerome?
That's exactly where I was gravitating towards, that bias, the positive bias of saying, you know what? This person's been, obviously the negative, well, maybe not so obvious, but on the other end of that spectrum, I would assume is that, if I give this person $10 out of my pocket, they're just going to squander it on something that's going to be useless, and it just goes down the drain. But there's that positive bias that says maybe this $10 helps that person feed their family, and this is their last day. They are finally going to decide that this is the moment that they will go ahead. That $10 is that foundation that will catapult them into hopefully moving into a better direction to finally get themselves into better shape. And again, with biases, who knows how they got into that position to begin with? A lot of negative bias suggests that they did it to themselves, but if you think on a more positive.
Honestly, though, okay, I'm just gonna put a big old kibosh. Okay, on some level, yes, people make decisions and everything, but from somebody who my sister is homeless. Like, my sister is that person, and she has a genuine mental illness, but she has made her own choices too, and we have tried to help, and we have to accept that. Like, and there is a space there. At the same time, though, I do feel like there's so many things that failed along the way that could have helped her, that it's not, I don't think it's, for me, it's not fair. I just try not to pass that judgment. Like, if I see somebody and I immediately humanize that person that's asking for money, because I think of my sister. And so I go, I hope somebody does the same for her. I will give you, the cash in my wallet. And I don't care what you do with it. Honestly, if it's going to make your life easier, then do what you will, whatever it's going to be. It's not for me to say once I've handed it over. It doesn't come with strings. So, but that's just me getting like my personal experience on it. So.
That's
my bias.
Yeah, I cheat with that too, because I believe in karma. So I believe that'll come back to me eventually. So I guess that's kind of cheating, but. So
is that fair? I'm just going to throw that, I believe karma, are we giving selfishly then? If that's the reason we're giving?
Sometimes I do think I am, but if it helps me feel better, and more importantly, someone else feels better, then, that's the worst case scenario. I'm okay with it, even if I do feel a bit selfish about it.
Not going to delve into the topic of, can you actually have an unselfish act? Is that actually possible?
Yeah, don't ask my opinion on this, because
I'm not.
It leads to a very different conversation.
I think that's the question. Can anything be anything? Can anything be spoken about? Can anything be done? Can anything be without a bias?
No, I say no.
I don't think it can be. I mean, when you even point out somebody not discussing something, that's a bias. If you anything you point out has got to be a bias. Our perception is, we are human beings. It runs through our filter. No matter what, our experience is going to affect what we think, what we feel, what we do. The growth and the space that is important, I think, here is that awareness piece, that that moment when you become aware of a bias that maybe has been destructive, or maybe that without knowing it, inadvertently, mistakenly, maybe is doing some harm, taking that moment to go, okay, wait, now I'm aware of this. What am I going to do to change it, to manage it, to move forward through it, or to change that bias within myself if that's what needs to happen?
And that's the piece that I think is important. It's really that I have recently, within the last like week, become like an advocate for self-awareness. Like I didn't give it the credit it once had, like how critical being self-aware is, just for growth, for learning, for life. A lack of is I pity somebody without the ability to be self-aware, honestly.
That sort of brings in a difficult concept, though. It's like, what? There's the things you do know. So, like, you're aware of your explicit biases. You might be aware of your implicit biases. Maybe not as they happen, but, you know, you sort of theoretically know what your implicit biases are. But there's probably like 90% of like, you don't know what you don't know. Like, how do you even begin to uncover those implicit biases and self-awareness when you don't even know like where to start? And so when you say like you pity the person who doesn't know, like how do you even help that person without, you know, just saying, here's your bias? And this kind of brings us back to coaching. If you're a coach and you're sitting in the coaching chair and you've got a client who very clearly has a bias that they are just so unaware of, how do you create that awareness while still coaching? Let's just say that, because it would be very easy just to say, hey, you're biased against X, but that's not really coaching, is it? When you just give it to them.
You just will get into that reflection like we've always been doing, right? We get into the reflection of what they're saying. How does that work for you? How does that serve for you? But asking in a neutral, you've got to come from that neutrality, not it's a good thing, it's a bad thing, it is that it's even a thing. You're in that reflection. How does that help you? In what ways does that serve you? What do you want to do with that?
So we were coaching Anthony a few weeks ago, and it was on something, and I think it was validation or something, and he was saying like, well, I get, you know, I want people to like me. I want for me to be, you know, X, Y, and Z, and he kept externally validating. So it was like he had a bias towards the opinions of others rather than his own. In that,
to be fair, I think this was one of my fake coaching.
Oh, it probably was, yes.
But that does happen though. Like in coaching, you'll always find people who are externally validated.
Well, and that's a bias. So in that space, you would ask, you know, how you would inquire about that bias specifically, but I don't think you would say this is a bias. You would say, so if you were being biased towards what other people think, well, what does other people, how does what other people think affect you? How is that, you know, how does that affect your life? Why is that important to you? I guess why is not, we don't want to why. So what does that mean to you? Exactly. Would be my feeling.
How does it serve you? What does it do for you to think this way?
And is it always, that's a place it's black and white thinking. So it takes us back to our gray space. So is it always that way? Is this space always going to happen that way if it's that kind of bias where it's always never? Yeah.
So that's why we're helping that client usually. I mean, I don't know exactly, but usually we're trying to help them find options to be thinking outside of what they normally have their thought process. I was reading this thing, which I've read before on Facebook, something along the line of, and I don't remember exactly, but something along the line with 4 + 5 does equal 9, but there's many, many other ways to get to 9. Not just the 4 + 5.
I was like, if you're going to try to tell me it equals something else, we're going to have a talk.
Again, that's going to lead to a whole. I've seen the argument.
Don't do the math.
I've seen the argument online in some weird forums that 2 + 2 does not equal 4 or equals 5, and there's this whole. It was trying to make this big point. I don't want to talk about math because it's going to get me triggered, and I will just.
Math is my favorite thing in the world.
I'm going to go nuts if I have to go into that conversation. Where were we?
Well, what we're talking about and our ability to coach our clients. We help them find whatever their options are if they're wanting to have options. Some people are very married to their way of doing things, and so we have to help them usually in that space find boundaries.
I
Yeah.
have a question.
No.
would do you think what percentage of clients are coming in without the desire to explore more options, that are like, I'm just here to be validated that my way is the only way and the best way?
I would say probably a majority.
Really? That's what they're all thinking? Wow.
I would say that's on the coach, though. Like, if you've got a bunch of clients coming to you that way, you got to think about how you market yourself.
Well, I mean, if that's maybe that's what.
Okay,
the
well,
coach
wait a minute. We remember what I do, right? We remember what I do, right? I'm a couples coach.
Okay.
Okay.
That's a special case though, where you've got two people who might be,
Well, yeah, they're like, I want my way. I want my way. I mean, they're that stuck in the me space. You got to instead of we space at that point.
But I'm gonna say probably the other portion of individuals that I've worked with, they want clarity. They may say they want change, but are they willing to do the work? I mean, it takes work. And I think I have a correction on what you read in ICF land. I think that was actually John Levin that gave us that calculation of the weight of 1 to 5. I think that was who it was. He works with John Gottman. At any rate, it doesn't matter. Just remembering that weight scale is important. When they come in to make a change takes a while to happen. From some research and information that I've gathered along the life's journey, the different things that say, how long does it take to make a change? Anywhere from like 60 to 200 days. Everybody says 21 days.
Really?
It's not about 21 days. 21 days is kind of get it going, right? That information of getting the new routine down, or the new thoughts or new behaviors, new whatever new is, takes a while to establish a pattern. But and does the old pattern go away just because now you get a new one? Does the old one go away? No, it's still there. It's still strong. And then there's this wolf. It's a fable. There's the word I'm looking for, a fable. And I don't remember all the details, but it's the grandfather talking with the grandson. And the grandson, well, how do I stay on the good side versus the bad side? And they were talking about the wolf. There's a good wolf and a bad wolf. It's whatever wolf you feed. Are you going to feed the good wolf, or are you going to feed the bad wolf?
It's good and bad. I mean, that in itself is a bias, like, because aren't we assuming, like, at that point, that this is good and this is bad and this is always good and this is always bad? But the truth is, always and never doesn't exist. So there are times when even the good is bad and the bad is good, and sometimes very bad things have very good results, and very good things have very bad results. And so I think that's the application of the concept of good and bad is absurd. But that's me asserting my dominance over this conversation, so I'm going to be quiet.
That's your bias there.
Yes. but it is in the same sense though. Notice what wolf you're feeding. Period. Doesn't have to be good or bad. The fable applies, right?
What bias wolf are you feeding?
What bias are you feeding, and is it a productive bias to be feeding? And why, if it's a choice, why choose to feed the bad ones, the bad wolves? Which I just did it. You hear that? Why the harmful? We'll say harmful. But how do you define harmful? I think you just give up on it all and you just exist, because there's just no doing it.
And how do you do that? That's rough.
And that's a bias right there too.
I think Misha trying to tell us, let's take this back to coaching.
Because give up on it all.
Because, well, biases are important and very relevant in coaching sessions. Yeah. And I think without getting too out there, we can really ground that conversation within coaching. And thank you, Misha, for the comment. She thinks that if we have identified from the beginning of the session what the client's goal it is our responsibility to ask the questions free from bias to help them reach their goal. If we don't ask the first question, then the bias is more likely. Oh, Not seeing
There's
you.
nothing else.
What I'm arguing with me, or the one thing I have is there's gonna be a bias. The bias
Mm.
fits. You can't avoid the bias, so you cannot ask a question without bias. What you can do though is be aware of your biases and be aware of the ones that are benefiting and the ones that are harming, right? So what do you do? What is a tool to bring that self-awareness to your coaching session? This is a space where I might be biased. I should be aware of it. This is how I'll be aware.
I would say in instances where your emotions are beginning to kind of arise, typically I would say when that's occurring, you're being triggered, and usually when you're being triggered, there's probably some biases tied to that.
They go hand in hand, the triggers and the biases.
Yeah. So I would say being aware of how you feel emotionally, and that could be a great tool of once you realize that your emotions are kind of moving away from a neutral place, which is important to kind of sit in while being a coach. Then you should probably maybe check and see which direction that's going in. That could be a tool to gauge whether or not you do have biases that may be arising that could affect the coaching session itself.
Isn't it fair to say it's managing your fixer, right?
Yeah.
It's not being that
100%.
guessing, not assuming you know what somebody's going to say next. It's if you're actually in that curious space where you're like, I have to check out I have to turn into blank, like I have to be just to some degree, which as much as best we can, but and just being in that curious space and not assuming you have the answer to any of the questions, assuming you have zero answers, and the client has all of them, and that's what coaching is, right?
Well, yes, in a coaching session, your client does have all the answers because it is about them. You're not looking for any answers outside of assisting your client in getting to their answers with those answers that they may bring to you.
So do I have to buy into my client's biases?
That's a good question. That's a really good question.
You
I don't think.
No,
Yeah.
I mean, you personally don't have to buy into it, but just let them have their biases. Like, it's not your job to fix it.
It doesn't have anything to do with you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a point though where their biases can prevent you from wanting to be there?
If
And-
they're
It's
saying
triggering.
racist
That's when you're
things
triggered.
or sexist
Yes.
things or homophobic things, then I'm not gonna coach them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a certain point where it's like you can sort of maybe step outside of the session and just sort of like, hey, like, here are the boundaries of coaching with us. We're not going to talk about these sort of topics.
I'm like, I don't know how I would handle that.
Yeah,
If somebody's like being just a asshole. Sorry.
Yeah.
Kid.
In my session where they're just saying things that are just small-minded, and if that were to happen, I mean, it would be hard pressed for me not to be like, stop it, leave.
I think
That would be
fine.
a difficult thing for me not to do, honestly. Like, I know though I should be empathetic in that space to some degree, and probably handle it a different way, but everything in me would want to be like, shh, shoot him.
Grab their lips and
Like, shh. Yeah, that would be hard. It would be hard.
what do you guys think are some biases that the bad biases that coaches have, maybe that work either against them or the client? I've got one.
I mean, what we talked about last week, expertise can be a bad bias on some level. Again,
Identification. They think they've been there, done that.
I think one that might be tempting is the money aspect of coaching, where you might be biased to keep a client longer than you should.
ooh,
Yeah.
and that's like selfish for your own self.
Yeah. I mean,
I got one similar where I've seen online. There's a coach who says, sometimes your clients have no idea what's going on, and that's okay, which is unfortunate. You should be coaching, and well, at least if you're going through our classes, you should definitely be coaching with the coaching model that you're taught.
yeah.
But there are some so-called coaches online that will say just ridiculous things that isn't necessarily coaching, and to adhere to the fact that it doesn't matter because the client doesn't know. It's just super gross to me.
As I'm thinking, like, so there's a lot of these coaches coaching space, right? And one of the things my bias is with those people that are coaching other coaches is that they're lazy. Like it's that they don't want to, they are in a space where they know there's a whole bunch of coaches and that they have kind of done it. And I'm sorry to say that to those people, I apologize. But so they're like, this is easy, I'm going to do this. Mind you, there are a ton of people that are great in that space and doing helpful things, but there are a lot that are not, and I guess you're going to find that no matter what. So that in bringing up that point, I think to myself, well, you can get into this very selfish space of like, okay, am I coaching to help people or am I coaching for my business? And that's a weird line to walk because it has to come me, right?
This is triggering my capitalism and capitalism rant, but you have those two things where you've got your motivator, as in you need to make a living at the very least as a coach. That should be your bias. That's a good bias to have, is you got to put the oxygen mask on yourself, be able to take care of yourself before you can help other people. So make a living. But most people also want to make a profit from their business, and how much of a profit is too much of a profit? It's kind of hard to say versus strictly helping people out of the kindness of your heart.
This is like such an introspective moment. Like I'm thinking like with everything. I mean, with regard to like, because I'm thinking like, well, what by surviving, being around people who are surviving versus thriving, because I've been in surviving modes, and I know when people are in surviving modes, they are typically not acting from a place that is always, I mean, like they can do desperate things when they're surviving. People can get desperate, and so that's scary to me. Like that's liability space. So I like always try. I prefer to be around folks who are thriving to some degree. Simply, but that's not fair either, right? That's completely. But is it for my own survival, right? Like, and that's like this weird space that you have to be in as a human being, where you've got to have your own oxygen mask on, so that you can help others to begin with.
Donna,
that's the quintessential negative bias to have as a coach, is to think that you have the right answers.
Yes. To think you know best or know better or can advise.
Not even that. It's just asking leading questions. I think that might be one of the most difficult things a coach needs to work on. Any coach needs to work on, is because we kind of give you the tools to ask those leading questions, but it's leading questions to bring about awareness, to empower the client to make their own decisions. But it's very easy to lead into your own biases to try to get to people to see things from your point of view. Can we
give an example of a leading question versus a non-leading question? Somebody?
I'll think of a good one for the blog, but it's going to be hard for me to think of one like on the spot.
Well, I was just going to say something totally snarky, and I withheld the snarky. I was just going to say, well, Anthony, we'll just got to have you coach for a few minutes, and eventually.
Eventually I'll ask the leading question.
You will ask a leading question.
That's because my bias now is to just not ask any questions, just keep entirely silent. Just let the person talk. Don't ask any questions.
I think to present that, we would need some more context. Is there a goal that we can just put out where we can say as an example that as a coach, ways that you could be using a leading question as opposed to client.
I can do the client thing. I can be the client and then you guys can ask if you want. We can do that. Or Lisa, do you want to be the client?
Let me think of something I can.
I just think we need a goal.
Well, that's why let's make this a real life thing so that it actually is practical. Okay. I have a goal.
Okay.
My goal is to hang my TV not crooked, and to finish putting up the art and cleaning the space and reorganizing it. It is a goal in my life, one that is thwarting me at the moment. My TV is crooked.
I'm going to be a bad coach for everybody out there on purpose. This is not me accidentally.
Oh, no, tell the truth. This is really you.
Why do you feel the need to have a TV? What is it about a TV that is important to you to
This has
have?
nothing to do with why I want the TV. I just want my TV straight. But right there, that would be a moment where I'm like, he doesn't get it. He doesn't get it. Like I have disconnected you. Now I don't think you're a good coach for me because you're not listening.
His bias could be, don't have a TV at all. You should have books.
Yeah, that's the bias I was going for.
But now you're not. Obviously, you don't get me, so I don't want you to be my coach anymore.
This might be a question that might come up if you're trying to maybe ground somebody's goal to an emotional anchor.
Well, and then why? So to ask why have the TV in the first place isn't that like disregarding my session goal? Completely. Isn't that like? I mean. Or is there like, no, we're gonna get there, we'll bring it around, trust me.
No, that shouldn't be
I would say at the very least it's altering your goal.
So what other leading questions or non-leading questions?
So non-leading, so we're aware that is a goal of yours. Since this is a goal of yours, are there any steps you've taken to get closer to that goal at all?
So here we started. There are I've had some obstacles, like my drill died, and for some strange reason, I cannot find the charger and the extra battery to my drill. Like it is not where I normally keep it. It is not anywhere I can find it. I know there are other things I can do to get it, but I'm just annoyed at this point.
What are those things that you could do?
There you go, Anthony.
What was that? I didn't hear Anthony's question.
What are those other things that you could do?
But none of these are leading. So you notice they're very open. So So what
trust me, I will be a bad coach eventually.
I can go to the store and buy myself another battery instead of pouting about it, and actually just go buy it and know that at some point the other one will turn up. But at least that will keep progress moving towards the reassembly of the space.
What else could you do?
Make time to do these things. And I'm not doing either.
Can you tell me more about making time?
Oh, I don't want to.
Okay.
So if you don't have time to do these, do you have time to watch TV?
The TV's not for me to watch. That's not the purpose of the television in the first place. The TV was not. It has nothing to do with me wanting to sit down and watch it. It exists for other reasons.
To read electronic books on that screen.
It exists for work. It exists so that when I have films that I've created or made, I can watch them on a big TV. If people are over and I don't want to entertain them, I can turn the TV on.
Well, there's my bias right there. Like, I assumed that you were just going to watch TV and you're just going to loaf around. And
not the purpose of that television. No.
Mm-hmm.
And it is crooked. Like genuinely, the thing is like, I could have used a level to begin with. That would have been smart. Mm-hmm. I did have the level there. Actually, yesterday I just determined I'm just leaving it crooked. It is a declaration of my this is how it just is. Accept it. My TV is crooked, and move on with your life.
Well, that wraps up that goal. You already had the solution before you started the session.
I forgot about it till just now.
People, maybe your coaching sessions won't go as easy as this one has.
I like to be an easy client.
I did a little looking on the internet, and I found a good example of like a leading question in a court of law is if a examiner asks a witness whether he was home on the night of the murder.
Oh, because he's saying instead of where were you, he's saying were you home? Yeah, I was home.
Well, not even that. It's the night of the murder is a leading question because it already assumes that a murder took place. The question in general is, was this person murdered or not? If you just wrap in your assumption into the question, that's an example of a leading.
Here I am assuming the location is important.
Yeah.
But that's where your biases as a detective could get you fired if you assume that there was a murder and it was foul play. Maybe
that probably won't happen in a coaching session, that specific example, but wrapping your own assumptions and conclusions into a question as if there was just a normal question can be very dangerous and might lead your clients astray.
So that brings me, I have a thought that popped into the head. So if I am coaching people within my expertise, I might be doing myself and my client a disservice. It might be easier for me to coach in a space where I have no expertise, because then I can be curious easier, right? Because I don't know.
Yeah, that's a really interesting concept.
Yeah.
I'm gonna market I'm gonna take that. I'm gonna market myself as
doesn't know anything. I know nothing. I love it.
I'm stealing that.
Do you think anybody would buy that? Do you think that anybody? No, nobody's gonna buy that. I didn't think so.
Maybe as a
novelty still
novelty.
exists.
If we can sell it right, come on.
I think we could sell it. I'm gonna keep that idea in the back pocket. No one else take that idea.
I'm the coach who knows nothing. Which is kind of Aristotle. The more you know, the more you realize you do not know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've got another question. This is not more so about coaches and coaching in the coaching session with the client, but do you guys think that there's a bias against coaches or the coaching?
Oh, God, yeah.
Oh, yes.
Oh my God, there's so many. Which one?
Well, yeah, I know. Like that might be a topic all on its own because we only got a few minutes. We got 10 minutes left.
But I mean, that's something coaching as a profession has been overcoming and like working to overcome, to be taken seriously, to show people that it's a viable option and something that has a positive outcome and is showing results and showing that it benefits. And
literally the reason why the ICF was created, as I was doing research for this, because before the ICF in the 90s, it was the Wild West.
Still is.
Nobody could do anything as the term coach, and it was just a mess. And then after the ICF, and then from then on, it's been just working to just eliminate those biases and further the coaching profession is something that is
one of the ones I've come across is that a coach is just anybody who is unemployed calls it like, oh, I don't have a job, so I'm gonna call myself a life coach. Like
it's like the influencer tag. Like if you call yourself an influencer, like, oh, you're professionally unemployed.
Entrepreneur. Oh, so you don't really do anything.
Oh.
Yeah.
Which those are my biases as well. I'm biased against entrepreneurs.
Our clients have a huge bias when they come in. They think that we are going to give them the answers, and that is not the case, right? So that's one of the biggest hurdles we have, I think, is to get the world to know what coaching is, like what it even actually is, because it's for the most part a giant misconception. Like, and don't get me. How do I get for years now? I've been asking this. How do I get the message out there? And that's why we exist right here.
Yeah. I mean, that's the biggest bias I would say is, who are you to tell me what to do with my life? Well, here's the thing. I'm not going to tell you what to do with your life as a coach.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
But then why do I need you? What do I need you for, right? But there's so much power.
Yeah, at that point, I would say, if you don't need me, then you don't need me. Don't coach with me. I'm looking for people who have problems and they want to be coached and they know the benefit of coaching and the process what you get out of it. If you're already there, good for you.
No, that's not what I'm thinking. What the space that I'm in is when you say, well, you're not going to give me any answers. This is a common question we get in class and stuff. You're not going to give me any answers. You're not giving me any solutions. You're just going to ask me questions. Who's going to pay me for that? Like, who's going to pay for that? It's actually very powerful space and a very powerful tool that people often underappreciate. It's usually the ones that want to give advice, but that do. But that space doesn't exist anywhere else, because everywhere else in the world, people are giving you opinions. People are telling you how to live your life. People are putting their biases on you. And the coaching space should be a space where you can just be, and it's not. That's why biases may come into play when it comes to asking the questions and our thoughts and what we're thinking, but they should never actually, I think, verbally come out as a coach, right? Should just be we know they exist, but we're there to be curious and ask questions, and that's where the unbiased piece comes in, I guess. Look at
before I took level 1, I had the opinion of coaching with snake oil sales. I researched a lot before I landed on a good school. My bias, the best school. I wonder what school that is.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna. No, that's your biases, Brooke and Lisa. I don't know what school that is. I'm not gonna assume. But it's us.
So what are we gonna do?
I am gonna assume it.
We have 4 minutes left. What are we going to do to let go of our biases? To not let go, but to
check them.
All of us. Let's all. What can we do this week to check our biases?
To ask ourselves our coaching questions. How does that serve us?
Yeah.
What does that support? Is that my intention?
I would be open to. Oh, go on.
I think I'm going to take it. Yes, and I agree, but take it one step back even, and say why am I doing anything I am doing? Like, you know what I mean? And is there a bias here? Does it exist? Just to ask, if I'm going left right now, am I going left because it's instinct and bias, or am I going left because I have making a conscious choice to go left and it is the best left to make? And have I taken a moment to be self-aware and instead of just acting and reacting, it's thinking before I act, I guess. Being self-aware before I make choices, essentially.
Yeah, that's what I would say. Just taking a moment to reflect, because sometimes you just get caught really in your habit of doing things, and you stop reflecting on, why you do certain things. So just taking that second minute to reflect. And again, Lisa mentioned it, ask yourself some coaching questions as to, why you did what you did and why that's important. Maybe not why, but what the importance is to you.
Also, I think it's important to ask, like, how is what am I doing affecting somebody else?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and taking that moment, because we are always usually stuck in our selfish, like, I need to do this, I need to do that, but taking that pause and going, how is how I am acting, behaving, or what I am doing affecting another person in my life? And taking a moment to actually consider it.
Yeah.
What I'll do is to be open to criticism and other people's sort of opinions of myself, because if you've got biases, it's like being a fish surrounded by water. You can do as much introspection as you can, but you're just not going to know what you don't know. Other people are going to take you out of that water, and they're going to let you know what your biases are, give sort of a third party objective opinion. Be open to that.
And you have to ask, I think, too, because I think a lot of people are afraid to share. And, like, you have to create a safe space. Like, I have attempted to practice radical honesty, and I didn't realize that with it, you also have to be able to accept and receive the bad in a way that isn't, like, gonna make somebody never want to be honest with you again. Like, so you have to be willing to, like, sit there and go, okay, this could be crappy, and I gotta be graceful.
Yeah.
Like,
that's where I use candor and kindness. Candor, you can still say something that has hurt your feelings or whatever we're talking about in general. But you can say it in such a way that's not going to be harmful to the other person. I had somebody one time, if you really want to know, I'm going to tell you. And they, like, literally felt like, to me, like they slapped me. And it was like, I don't ever want to do that again.
I'm going to tell you, it's not going to be pleasant when someone else points out a bias that is so obvious to them and maybe everyone else that you just were completely unaware of. It's going to suck.
It's going to, but it's also can lead to a great deal of growth. Like, take a moment and then go, okay, and that's the key, right? It's a little bit Byron Katie's the work. If somebody else is doing something that is driving me up the wall, it's probably because that exists in me somewhere. So, like, if there's something that just bothers me about somebody else, the first thing I should be doing is asking myself, how do I do that? Like, how is in my life do I do what this person is doing, and how can I fix that first before I ever get, like, you suck to somebody else? And that's my cats are out in full force right now. Like, and Nick, do you see Nick back here?
Yeah, I see the little white bird.
So they're both up and they want my attention.
Giving you the death stare right now.
Yeah. All right, I think that's all for today, guys. Danger's going to say bye. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure and check us out, Certified Life Coach Institute. Lisa, you want to sign off?
Thank you so much for coming. Enjoy the journey. Come visit us on our 3-day intensives. It's a lot of fun. If you've been here, fantastic. We love you all for coming and showing up. And if you haven't been with us, come check us out. CertifiedLifeCoachInstitute.com.
See you guys next Tuesday.
Yeah.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to today's episode. Once again, this is brought to you by Certified Life Coach Institute. We're an ICF accredited school who certifies our life coaches in 3-day online intensive courses. In addition to other podcast episodes, feel free to check us out every Tuesday at 4:00 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on YouTube or Facebook for our CLCI Lives, where we get together and discuss various topics that are centered around sharpening your skills so you can become a better certified life coach. For more information, feel free to visit us at CertifiedLifeCoachInstitute.com. Until next time, be well.